Terence Murray was a Canberra pioneer, former owner of the Australian Government House site, now the home to the Governor-General, and a pastoralist. He had to contend with the extremes of flood and drought and was always on the lookout for greener pastures. He found them not far from where the Murrumbidgee River begins, in the New South Wales high country near Cooleman Plains, during an expedition to the Tumut area in 1839. That year, his overseer, Stuart Mole, established the first homestead on Ngarigo country. It was a slab and bark hut, and he found the site with the help of the local Aborigines, who took considerable time to help him find their local trails in the area. The present Long Plain Road follows one of those trails. By the 1880s, the property had been purchased by Frederick Campbell, whose family had a long association with Duntroon. George Southwell was employed as an overseer for Coolamine and moved to the plain in 1882. His wife rode side saddle with a baby cradled in her arms, whilst George drove the bullock team. The wagon they used now lies in ruin on a small rise above the homestead. Once there, they set about building a new home along more substantial and comfortable lines than the one Murray sheltered in. Southwell's hut is a long slab building and still stands today. The craft of cutting and fitting wooden slabs had a high standard of excellence in those days and is still to be admired. Once cut, the slabs were shaped and fitted so that each slab would slightly overlap the one below, giving a weatherboard effect that prevented water from seeping through the cracks. The insides of the finished hut were lined with numerous layers of newspaper, glued with flour and water. Alongside Southwell's is Campbell's house, a striking building with a high-pitched roof and rounded, whitewashed slabs. The home was built for Campbell in the 1890s so that he, his wife and his family could spend part of each summer up there. By 1895, the Southwell family had grown to 7 children. Some of the winters were very harsh, and Mrs. Southwell and the children would often spend a few months at the family property Rosevale, between Sutton and the present Canberra. There was no Canberra in those days, and provisions were usually brought from Queanbeyan every 6 months by bullock wagon. Perishables such as meat, milk, eggs, butter and cheese were produced on site. Cheese was made in the log cabin hut built on a rise above the 2 homesteads. It had a grass thatch under the iron for insulation in the winter and to stop the roof from dripping. The Southwells left the area in 1907 and were replaced by the Taylors from Braidwood. In 1927, the Campbells sold Coolamine to the Litchfields of Cooma. In 1934, Coolamine was sold to the Norton brothers from the Riverina. The Kosciuszko National Park was declared in 1944, and even though Coolamine was a freehold enclave until 1975, it seems that after the 50s little was done to maintain it. Photos show that it steadily deteriorated, and by the late 1960s, some buildings like the large hay shed on the hill and the small slab hut next to the cheese house had gone. In the 1980s, a group of dedicated volunteers, armed with a government grant, set about rebuilding Coolamine Homestead using as many of the remaining materials as they could. They faithfully restored the buildings to their original plans and used traditional methods during this work. A link to the restoration film is in the description below. Coolamine Homestead is managed by the New South Wales National Park Service and can be visited by 4-wheel drive. We've put links to relevant web pages and information in the description below. The Coolamine Homestead is a living monument to our early agricultural pioneers who forged a living and a life in often harsh conditions to provide for the growing nation. It remains one of my favourite places to visit, and I'll leave you with a photo of me enjoying a coffee on the front veranda of Southwell's hut.